Well, as the weather gets nicer, I'll try to make these a little more visually appealing in the background. But today I'm going to be talking about iMovie on the iPad. I just recently completed a project using iMovie on the iPad, and it was basically a two-camera shoot where and the cameras were both iPhones. I had two iPhones going at an event outdoors and taking both still photos and video, and used the camera connection kit to import them into the iPad and then edit them on the fly in the field. Now combine that with when I edited last week my vlog initial thoughts on the iPad 2, which I did entirely on the iPad 2. I think I've pretty much got the measure of this piece of software. We'll start with the good. Compared to the iPhone version of iMovie, the iPad is a joy to manipulate. Flipping clips around, scrolling, even picking up the end points and trimming them is much simpler than it was on the iPhone. Although the metaphor is the same, the space that you have to get your finger on makes all the difference in the world. In fact, it's very much obvious that the interface for iMovie on the Mac is almost as if it was designed for fingers and just wasn't implemented that way. But it really comes through on an iMovie on the iPad that this is a new way to manipulate and handle clips, and it works very well in as much as it can be done. And now for the bad. The first part is that the editing of audio is confusing in some ways. It's quite easy to add a sound effect, and there's a narration tool. It's very good. Very much like iMovie on the Mac, you just simply pick the part where you want your narration to start, hit the record button, it backs up, gives you a countdown of 3, along with beeps and visual cues, and then you record your narration while watching the video. If you don't like it, you just simply re-record it, or you save it and it puts it down as a separate track. As it does with the sound effects, it puts those down as separate tracks. But from everything I can find, music can only be laid down as a background. Now, I'm going to say that that's false. I have been able to add music as a separate audio track that can be moved around, but it's inconsistent. Sometimes it adds it as a background track. Most of the time it adds it as a background track. Every once in a while it adds it as a separate audio track. I can't figure out what the magic incantation is to get it to do that consistently. And from everything I see, from all the tutorials I've found online, all the reviews I've seen and everything I can come from Apple, you're not supposed to be able to do that. It might just be a bug, but it's actually an enhancement if it could be done consistently. But it doesn't seem to be consistent. The next thing that is just awful is the bin. I don't think they call it that, but that's the term that I'm normally used to it being associated with. That's where your raw clips are stored. And in this case, it pulls them in from the photo reel or from the import reel from your iPad. So you either have shot the video from your iPad, or you've shot the video on a compatible camera and imported it with the iPad camera connection kit. And those videos are placed strictly in order from newest to oldest, and you are presented with a film strip of them. There's no names, there's no metadata. You can see the length, but nothing else. You can select the clip, and you can trim the front and the end, but when you're doing that, it shows you where the trim head is, but it doesn't give you any audio. And as far as I can tell, there's no way to play it back and see what that clip is. This is very confusing if you have a lot of clips that have basically the same thing, such as an interview or an event at a particular location that might have very similar shots. If you can't hear what's being said, if you can't play the clip before you insert it in the project, there's just a lot of trial and error. You pick what you think is the right clip, throw it in there, then play it. It isn't it. You take it back out, you pick another one. You can't go into the clips and, having determined what they are, add some sort of narrative to them, like this is, you know, person answering a question about this, or you know, this is the writer whose horse threw him off, or whatever it happens to be. You can't do that. You don't have any mechanism for rejecting clips, unless you just go delete them from the camera roll, which would be leaving the program and coming back. You don't have any way of marking them as good clips or as favorites. All in all, that really needs a lot of work, and it's if you were doing a project with any number of clips, it's extremely difficult to manage and organize, and that really needs to be worked on. And finally, and this is the worst, there is no overwrite or superimposition editing. And this is such a major oversight. There are many instances, particularly if you've got two cameras being shot, where you want to cut between one camera and another, but you want to preserve, say, the audio track of one of the two cameras as a master soundtrack. Or you want to insert an overlay shot, like here, this shot of me typing on the iPad while still talking to you. Now, it's possible to cut pieces in, but then you would have to come back and do the narration after the fact, because you can't overlay the audio from one clip to another. And this is just such a serious shortcoming that it effectively ruins this product for being any kind of serious editing tool. And I know it's $5 and you're supposed to be using it out on vacation, but that's the simplest of things. And the interface that they've got should be able to do it. It certainly has the power to do it. Why isn't this implemented? This ruins the application for me. It means that this video will be edited on the Mac and not on iMovie on the iPad. And that's my final conclusion. If they could just implement more features of iMovie from the Mac onto this project, including the overwrites, a consistent audio track laydown so that you can lay down audio pieces independent of the, so that you could fix them and place them where you need them, and clean up that mechanism for organizing your clips so that you can find them and work with them. This would be an absolutely amazing tool. As it is, it's a near miss. It's flashy, it shows the shape of things to come, but it is not adequate to the job.